Greetings, humans. Welcome to the Smoke Show. My name is Josh Smokey Hell Nelson, and this is not a fantasy football episode. This is a mental health awareness episode, a subject that I have broached in several of my interviews over the course of this podcast. There are going to be some heavy subjects being discussed today, including depression, anxiety, and suicide. These can be too much for some people, so if you'd like, go hit subscribe and we'll let you know when the next episode, which will be back to football, drops. I will be diving into my own personal mental health issues with the purpose of showing everyone listening that you are not alone in what you might be going through. Being open and honest with ourselves and breaking the stigma that mental health issues are taboo, forbidden, and not to be discussed, it's so important to break that. The clarity and relief that just speaking your truths can bring can also be overwhelming. It's okay to have these feelings. It is okay to be who you are. We are all wired differently to extremely oversimplify it, and there's no shame in the way your DNA was coded. Again, these will be some difficult topics, so if that is something that will affect you more than you choose, I understand, and I will see you next time. This will be the only scripted portion of today's show.
Smoke Show!
Okay. So, just as uncomfortable as these things can be to hear, they can also be just as uncomfortable to say. Uh, Most people see me usually as this, very energetic person, which I am. Um, but there's probably reasons for that. um, I was diagnosed professionally with depression 20 years ago when I was 18. And it was at the time just putting myself back in that headspace. It was I could tell things were different from myself to others. The way I should be reacting, responding to situations, feeling generally, and so I went to get diagnosed, and sure enough, the doctor said I have depression, and okay, cool. What are my next steps from here? And for him, it was antidepressant medication. And full disclosure, I'm not a big fan of medication, unless we're grown in the ground. Um, so begrudgingly, I just, I wanted to feel better, quote unquote. So I went on them for, I don't even know, 3 or 4 or 5 months. And to to describe it to someone who hasn't been on them, it made you feel different, and it wasn't exactly in a way that I enjoyed. It wasn't a way that I thought was even a good version of myself. It was just I felt like I was behind a sheet of like I don't even know cellophane or something, and couldn't. It's just really hard to explain. Anyways, it made me feel different, but not myself. Whereas depression made me feel different, but it was myself. So it was what I knew. It didn't make me feel different. It just I was aware that I was different from quote unquote normal. So after X amount of months, whatever it was not a long time. I took myself off them, and being young and thinking you know everything about the world and yourself, I thought that I was mentally strong enough that I could overcome this thing and, beat it. It's 20 years later, still here. and so is the depression. And by all accounts, I live what most would consider a very great life. I have a beautiful wife. Shout out Rachel, love you. I have a handsome, healthy son, Felix. We live in a house that we own. Um, we're all generally healthy. We've made it through a pandemic in one piece. But that doesn't to explain that to people who don't have depression, who can't see life through the lens that I see it through. Other people who battle with depression see it through. It's hard to explain, but just because you have something good doesn't mean it doesn't preclude you from negative, dark feelings that you can't control. You can't bend to your will. You can't always mentally overcome like I once thought you could. Uh, when Felix was born, for probably the first year that he was alive, and he's about to turn 3 in a month, which is fucking awesome, and he's the coolest kid. But anyways, I digress. I for the first like year that he was alive, I could not be in a situation or a room or anything where I am not picturing what is of imminent doom to my son. He's fragile. I'm here to make sure that he is protected, that he is nurtured, that he reaches a nice full life, and all these things would just crowd my head, and I literally could not be in a situation where I was not. And I've got a very vivid mental picture. I can. There wasn't a situation where I wasn't picturing my son lifeless in my hands or at my feet or in a. It was pure torture mentally to live with, and I've gotten past that to a pretty good degree, where it's, these things might pop up once every couple months or two or everything like that, but he's solid, man. The kid runs into walls all the time. He's fine. I mean, he's a toddler. He does what toddlers do, and he's made it through like a champ. So like these concerns are less, and I'm sure so many fathers go through that to some degree, but like when it would just be when it would seep into your thoughts and be to the point of crippling, where you couldn't. Sorry, just a minute to focus here. These things don't go away. And it wouldn't just be in those situations where, once the situation's over, that thought was gone into the ether. Those things, they stick. Sometimes they wake you up at night. Sometimes they would keep you from sleeping at night, from even starting it. During that time, I was also working a job in sales where I was on the road covering a very large swath of territory. And, those were some long days on the road, 12, 13, 14 hours occasionally. And just long, long stretches of highway. Beautiful country, beautiful. But like, it would just kind of creep in the back of your head and just be there, ever present. And you'd be looking at these bridges you're crossing of just huge expanses over valleys and everything, and you're choosing which one you would just drive that truck off of, and just which one you would like to see as the final scene before it's gone and you are no more. Dark thoughts, man. These dark thoughts, they're terrible to have, but they're mine. I mean, I don't even know it. I mean, I could go back on antidepressant medication, but these thoughts they're present. but they're fewer and far between. After 20 years, you know yourself more than anyone can, and you learn the best ways to deal with these things. Um, I worked for 20 plus years in this last time since then in the hospitality industry. So as a bartender, as a person running restaurants and bars, pubs, everything like that, you come across a lot of people. You hear their life stories, willingly or not. You hear them. But it was so cool. I found it fascinating. I'm a people person, and to be surrounded by that, to absorb all these stories, all these viewpoints of life, all these ways of life, it gives you perspective. And through that, you get to talk about your own stuff as well. What you divulge is, your prerogative. I'm fairly open with my things, saying the stuff like I just mentioned about, the driving the truck off the road and finding which one would be the best. That's something that prior to this I've only really shared with my wife. So you stay guarded on some things, but I'm generally an open book. I would divulge stuff about myself through the hospitality industry, and it's talking about these things. It helps. It makes you see that you're not alone. I mean, to think that you are alone in a day and age where we are so interconnected by the internet and everything else, I mean, it'd just be kind of hubris and narcissistic at that point. We are all connected in one way or another. I mean, most of the listeners that are consuming this right now, we are connected through fantasy football. But I would say it's a fair bet to say a lot of you have your own mental health issues, and you know what? That's who you are. That's who I am. And to deny that, I mean, some people, they need to medicate to get past it. I'm not judging. That's just not my style. There's nothing wrong with that. Um, would I ever consider it again? If it got to a point where it was affecting my family life, where it was affecting the way I raise my son, absolutely. I would have to consider it at that point, because my wife and my son mean everything to me. Um, and to let my own mental health issues affect that wouldn't be something I would want to live with. Um, they are of paramount importance, so I would do what is necessary to make things good. Fortunately, that is not an issue. I think we're doing pretty good. Like I said, Felix walks into walls sometimes, but toddlers. um, one other kind of area I wanted to touch on was one that's a newer one to me. That this is about anxiety. And I've always been a pretty pretty outgoing kind of guy, and surprise, surprise, anxiety wasn't really something I ever dealt with. The first time I can really remember feeling like like chest clutching, hard to get your breath, anxiety that you cannot just you can't even process the linearity of your thoughts, um, was when my now wife, she was a girlfriend at the time, we were about to take our first trip abroad. We went to Mexico, and the morning of, I woke up and it's just terrible feeling. And she has dealt with anxiety for quite some time, so she was able to sniff it out right away, and she would kind of talk me through it. And it was terrible, terrible. I hated it. I mean, not that anyone likes these kind of feelings, but anyways, that was just kind of a one-off thing, and didn't really feel anything until this pandemic hit. And whereas before I was quite comfortable to a degree being in crowds, being around crowds and everything like that, go and bartend a big festival or whatever, you're dealing with 60,000 people and everything coming to go. That's cool, man. That was great before the pandemic. And I developed just an anxiety about being around people with with masking up. Like, I wore masks way before they were mandatory and everything. And I still do. They BC, where I live here, British Columbia, we just lifted the mandatory thing, but I'm still wearing mine because I mean I haven't had my second vaccination yet, and I I don't really trust the general populace farther than I can throw them. A person is great, people are not. But anyways, different topic. Uh, that that anxiety is something I deal with now. I'm hoping now that once the vaccination rates around here are up to the 65%, 75%, I'm gonna feel a little less anxious about things. I'm hoping that once I get my second vaccination, I'm gonna be feeling way better about things. Um, I'm hoping this is something that is not become a permanent part of me. If it is, I evolve with it. I learn to deal with it. Uh, Sorry, one second. If it's permanent, so be it. And if it's not, fucking awesome. But whatever. Smokey's gonna keep on being Smokey. I just wanted to tell my truth today, and this has been it. A little deeper than most people have ever gone. So don't be afraid to speak your truths. Yeah, I don't know. If you've made it this far, I thank you for taking the time to listen to some uncomfortable aspects of my truth, of who I am. If you want to dive further into this topic, I highly suggest checking out the Mental Health Podathon this Friday, July 9th, created by friend of the Smoke Show, Michael Hoff, and the Hayden Hurst Family Foundation. It's a 24-hour podathon with some of the biggest names in the industry, doing what I'm doing today, helping in part to break the stigma surrounding mental health. My name is Josh Smokey Hell Nelson, and this has been a special episode of The Smoke Show.